Hello and welcome to another video and the start of a series that I'm doing on wood finishes. I've had a good amount of positive feedback on the video that I did covering a shellac application, and so I figured I would expand upon that and do a video covering a series of finishes. For this series, I have 14 different finishes in front of me, and I've organized them in what I believe to be the easiest to apply and learn how to use over here on my right, all the way to the more complicated and most difficult to learn how to apply and utilize here on my left. How I've ranked them, of course, is purely subjective based on my personal preferences. The cult following that is the lacquer community is probably going to come for my head when they realize I've put it in last place. However, I'm going to do a video demonstration on each individual finish and explain my choices as I go to hopefully help you make a decision on what finish is the best for you. The world of wood finishing can be quite confusing if you're just starting out, and it can be overwhelming to simply make the right selection. So before we jump into the video demonstrations of each of these finishes, we need to talk about some basic terminology and some fundamentals of wood finishing first. Just to note, this is meant to be a beginner series. This is not meant to make you a professional applier of any of these finishes. I just want to give you the knowledge and the confidence that you need to start utilizing these finishes for the first time. So just know that I will leave some of the more complicated concepts out, and I don't want to overcomplicate things too much in the beginning. First, we'll talk about purpose of wood finishing, and I want to separate the purpose of wood finishing out into three distinct pillars: protection, aesthetics, and feel. The first thing that we think about when we're finishing wood is probably protection. We want to protect wood because obviously moisture can cause swelling and cracking, and spills can cause stains. It can get scratched, dented, scraped, all other sorts of things. Secondly, aesthetics. A good wood finish can really make the grain of a wood pop. It can deepen colors, highlight warmer tones, and preserve natural looks. So much of your character from your finished project can simply come from choosing the right wood finish. Lastly, feel, which in my opinion isn't the most important of the three pillars. However, the right finish can leave your piece feeling smooth and natural to the touch. Now, when selecting your finish, you have to realize that some of these do better at some of the three pillars than the others. Something like a cutting board oil that I have over here can really make your piece look beautiful. However, it doesn't offer the best form of protection. Something over here like a polyurethane can really do great at protection. However, it can leave your finished project looking somewhat plastic. And again, it's also worth noting that some of these are hybrid blends of different things which attempt to get the best of both worlds, and we'll go over that next. Wood finishes fall into two main categories based on how it interacts with the wood itself. Penetrating wood finishes, 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 Penetrating wood finishes soak into the wood like a sponge and hardens the wood fibers, which enhances the look of the wood from the inside out. They generally don't leave a thick layer on the surface, which can allow the wood to keep its natural feels like wood style. An example of something like this and what I have here would be the pure tongue oil. Penetrating finishes generally are chosen for their aesthetics and not so much their protection usually. So therefore, the second category is film building. Film building finishes are designed to leave a hard protective layer on top of the wood, like a clear sheet of plastic. This film acts as a shield against things like dents, spills, and scratches. An example of a film building finish that I have here would be a lacquer. Film building finishes are notorious for their protection, however, generally aren't usually selected purely for aesthetic reasons. And again, it's worth noting that there are hybrids of these. Take, for example, the Danish oil that I have here that is a blend of several mixes, which try to get the best of both worlds. So next is classifications, and this is where things can get really confusing very quickly. Some of this is just due to what has been available to us over time. We as humans have been finishing wood for thousands and thousands of years. Historically, however, we've used natural finishes. However, with the introduction of more recently synthetically produced materials such as polyurethane, which was invented in 1937 and originally used for aircraft coatings, the lines of classifications can get blurry between the mixtures of several components. Then you have things like teak oil here, which can be confusing simply because it contains no components of a teak tree. It just traditionally was used to finish teak wood, and that's where it got its name, teak oil. No wonder no one can understand any of this. How we classify things can change. Take, for instance, something like a shellac, which was traditionally considered a varnish, isn't usually considered a varnish based on today's standards. Okay, waxes. Waxes are primarily polishes that offer minimal protection, however, are super easy to apply. My wood wax over here is an example of this. Aesthetically, these can make the wood look very nice. However, usually you have to reapply these finishes frequently because they offer a lower protection. Penetrating oils absorb into the wood and cure. They can produce a beautiful finish, however, they do also offer limited protection. Again, my tung oil is a great example of a penetrating oil. And something to know about penetrating oils is they can sometimes take a very long time to cure. Days, weeks, even months per coat. So using penetrating oils can require a lot of patience. However, if you have that patience, penetrating oils can produce a beautiful finish that makes your final project look like it's untouched by an angel. And since my YouTube algorithm shows that 100% of my viewers are in between the ages of 35 and 45, I'm hoping you understand that reference. A varnish is a hard drying liquid that cures to form a durable layer on top of the wood. It's important to note that curing is not drying. A varnish hardens through a chemical reaction and not just through the evaporation of a liquid. Traditionally, a varnish would contain two main components, a solvent and a resin. A resin is a material that forms the hard protective layer, and a solvent is what makes it a liquid to get into these containers and for us to be able to apply it. Modern oil-based varnishes usually contain drying oils and metallic dryers. Drying oils assist the curing process through oxidation and help the finish be more flexible and less brittle. Metallic dryers are used as catalysts to accelerate this process, which can reduce the drying time from days, weeks, and months down to mere hours. Our polyurethanes are probably the most popular example of varnishes. However, just note that the water-based varnishes will not have the drying oils or metallic dryers. These are just resins dissolved by a solvent, which cure through a chemical reaction. Hybrid finishes try to find a middle ground, and there's a lot of variations here, and so I don't want to get too far into the details because this video could get quite long. However, like I've mentioned a few times, this Danish oil is a great example of a hybrid finish which attempts to blend several properties for a natural look and feel of a penetrating oil while still offering the protection of a varnish. One piece of advice I can give you is really look closely at what you're buying because it can be very deceiving. For example, what I have here is a pure tung oil, which is a penetrating oil. And over here, I have a tung oil finish, which is actually a varnish that contains tung oil for its drying oil and resin. And before I move on, I'm acknowledging again that I've very much oversimplified this. And I'm sure if you're someone that's already very skilled with finishes, you may already be typing out all of your thoughts as I speak. Please do share. However, for the rest of us, just understand I really just scratched the surface here, and there are several things that I intentionally chose to leave out. I really just wanted to keep this video as beginner friendly as possible for when you're getting started with your finishes. Finally, before I end this video, I recently mentioned the word oxidation and we need to talk about it. If you're using an oil-based wood finish, you need to understand that the oil cures through the oxidation process. Oxidation is a chemical reaction that occurs when a substance links to oxygen through a chemical bond. This process is an exothermic reaction, meaning that it creates heat. Now, if you're anything like me when you're applying wood finishes, you're probably going through a ton of shop rags trying not to make a huge mess. But you need to realize and remember that each of these oily rags are interacting with oxygen and creating heat. When you take your shop rag and you crumple it up, you're creating an insulative layer, which is trapping the heat inside of it. Then when you stack your rags on top of each other, the heat continues to rise and has no ability to dissipate into the atmosphere around it. And if you're catching my drift, this can cause a fire. So when you're done with your shop rags, make sure you lay them out flat to fully dry before disposing of them. And it's always a great idea to have a fire extinguisher nearby for many reasons in addition to this. So there you have it. This is a basic rundown of wood finishes. I'll be mentioning these concepts throughout each of the demonstration videos, so feel free to jump back to this video if you ever need a refresher. Also, some of you might have noticed that I have left out a couple common wood finishes. This is intentional. If enough people call me out on it, I will add it to the end of the video series. Otherwise, I have 14 videos to shoot, edit, and release. So take care of yourselves, be kind to each other. Don't skip breakfast. That one's more for me. And I hope to see you on the next one.